Hey, welcome to the Strong Roots podcast. My name is Kristin Hill, and we are so excited that you're tuning in today. Our prayer is that you would move one step closer to Jesus through this series. So go ahead and check out this next episode. Welcome back to the Strong Roots podcast. We are in season 6, and we are talking about our purpose. And I'm here with Pastor John, and I'm going to be interviewing him today. And the topic we're going to be talking about is how you matter to God. So, Pastor John, are you ready for me to pick your brain?
Yeah.
All right. So our first question, it's kind of a deep one, but why are we alive? And why is having a purpose in this life so important?
Well, I think that is really fundamentally one of the biggest questions we can answer. And for me as a person, this is a big driver. And I think I've always wanted to make a difference in the world. I've wanted to make a big impact, And it's so interesting because I feel like so many adults fantasize about having a life that means something. Mm-hmm. And you remember that old movie Top Gun? Okay, it had like Maverick and Goose, and they're walking away from their F-14 Tomcat with that music playing in the background. Cooper, you'll need to get that music playing briefly, 7 seconds or less. But I imagined that's what a difference would feel like. Like I'd walk away from my jet after shooting down MiGs to save the free world, and it totally didn't feel like that. It didn't feel satisfying at all, And I get to do things that are pretty difference-making, and I think as we realize, God is sovereign over all things, and he doesn't need us, but he wants us to love him, all of a sudden it's this isn't about what I do. It's about what my heart is like as I do it. Because my purpose isn't to, build a great church or be a great husband or to be a great dad. My purpose is to glorify God, and he doesn't need us. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden it was man, this isn't about me walking away from the jet. God walks away from the jet, and I serve him as his helmet or something. You know what I mean? And my job is to bring glory to God. He's the star of the show, and I'm here to bring glory to him and to serve him in whatever way I can. And my joy comes from his glory. And I know that that's strange, it's flipping things on its head, but it's made life so much more satisfying for me, because when I didn't have those iconic moments, or even when I did have those iconic moments, they didn't feel right. You know what I mean? Because there's a part of me when I'm in that recognizes I wasn't made for this. I wasn't made to be the star of the show. I was made to glorify God. And when I live functioning to really serve God with my whole life, it's so much more satisfying.
So you're saying the reason why we are alive is to glorify God?
Yeah. The reason we're alive is to glorify God. Absolutely.
So that's what we were made for?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So do you think God has a unique purpose for each of us, or do you feel like it's the same for all of us?
Well, we did just finish a 5-week series called Finding You, where we talked about the Enneagram and, the soup scoop and the cheese grater. And a soup scoop's not going to look at a cheese grater and say, I wish I was a cheese grater. God has many different parts of the body that come together to serve to glorify him. And I think all of us have a different and unique role, And I think it's really cool the way that our creative God was able to show his incredible creative power in the way that he made the world. There's no snowflakes that are the same. There's no whatever. Everything is so unique and special. And I think every person has a different and slightly unique role in the way that they serve God's kingdom, for sure. And I think part of glorifying God is the continuing search for your ideal role within the kingdom, And I don't think it's necessarily about finding it. I think it's continuing to be the best version of you that God created you to be. And that's kind of special.
So for the people watching, and they're watching this, and they believe in Jesus as their Savior, and they're I want to do something more with my life. I want to figure out my purpose. What would you tell them to do? How do you even start that journey?
Well, I think that it is like building the plane in the air. I think so many people never even try to take off. They spend their whole life looking for a purpose, but you're not going to find it until you really begin trying things, And again, it's never been about achieving perfection. It's been about continuing development. And I think so many people miss out on the very best part of God's purpose, which is serving all of your life for his glory and your good. We never do it. We just sit on the runway and we never even try to fly. And again, I would encourage people who are considering, or looking for God's purpose, try things. And again, if you're looking for that iconic Top Gun moment, that's not what serving God feels like. It isn't. It doesn't feel that way. And if you're looking for that, it's idolatry. You're worshiping yourself, And God didn't create us to do that. He created us to glorify him. And you're going to find contentment as you seek for, his glory and your good.
So are you even saying, what I hear you saying is, in the mundane, in doing the laundry, in doing the dishes, in your job, and everywhere you go, we are to serve the Lord and not man.
Yes.
And that, like, we can find purpose in the everyday, every minute.
Oh, yeah. I think every single thing we do, like, again, I think we look for these iconic Instagrammable moments, and, like, God didn't give us, like, one post a day or one post every other day, like, moment. Like, life isn't going to feel like that. He gave us every second of every day to glorify Him. And we can do it whether we're changing a kid's diaper, preaching a sermon, or driving our car. Like, we have the opportunity to glorify Him. And again, it's not about the momentousness of the things we're doing. It is about our heart as we're doing even the mundane or the momentous. Like, it's all about our heart worshiping Him. Like, do we love God in this? Yeah.
That's such a good point. So off of that statement, I think for me personally, it's really easy to try to find my purpose in other things.
Oh, yeah.
In Instagram, in what I'm doing, an achievement I have just made. So how do we check ourselves? How do we make sure that we're actually finding our purpose in God?
Man, again, I think it is a heart that genuinely wants God's name to be made great in everything we do. You know, and like, it is, man, I don't think I struggle with this as much as I used to. Like, when I was a young man, I really yearned to lead a church that was thriving, and I wanted to speak at conferences. And you remember me saying that all the time, like, oh, I want to do all this stuff. I just don't care anymore. Like, there's no satisfaction in that. Like, I've been down that road. There's none. Like, and it is all about, like, I really, really, really want God's name to be glorified. I want people to know God because it is the best for them, but because I love God. Like, I know He is worthy of it. And I think that you know your heart as you do things, you know, and I think that so many of us struggle with wanting it for ourselves or wanting it for our children. It's not about them. Like, it's about Him all the time.
Right. What would you say to somebody who feels like they don't matter to God right now?
Man, I think that's fundamentally demeaning to who God is. Like it's demeaning His power. Like, of course, God is able to love everyone, and that doesn't feel very good because you want to be loved exclusively, but He's able to love everyone. He has so much power. He's able to love everyone infinitely more than anyone could love anyone. And I think that's kind of a cool thing to think about. Like, that's part of worshiping God, is receiving His immeasurable, infinite love for you and who you are in that moment, and understanding, like, God in His infinite glory and power and omniscient presence is able to love you uniquely and specially. And man, again, like, this isn't about you being lovable. This is about God being powerful. And I think for so many people who are doing that, like, again, this isn't a you thing. This is a your faith in God thing. And I think it's sort of, honestly, a little bit demeaning to who God is to think, well, I'm unlovable. Like, believe me, He's capable of loving you, you know?
Yes, that is very good. So, last question for you. What do you wish someone would have told you about God's purpose for your life 10 years ago?
You know, it's not that people didn't tell it to me. It's that, like, even though I believed it in my head, I didn't really accept it in my heart. But it is about, I always thought I needed to do big things for God. And, like, I don't know. I feel like you and I are doing things that are relatively not small for God. And yet there's, like, no more satisfaction in that than when I was a pimply-faced freshman, scared at Wheaton, you know, in my college, like, capturing geese and letting them go in you know, the girls' dorm floor. Like, I mean, there was, like, the things that I did then for God's glory, I think are no more meaningful to God then as what I'm doing today. You know what I mean? And it was about my heart then, and it's about my heart now, and it's about my faithfulness every single day. And I knew that then. I just didn't believe it. But now I know it and I believe it, and I just think, man, this is my stewardship of the time that God has given me. And you know what? Like, if I got paralyzed and I could no longer speak and I could only think and blink, like, I believe that God's delight in me and the purpose of my life would be no different. Does that make sense? And I think for so many people, like, again, we get caught up in these other things, but I would want to think and blink for God's glory with the same magnitude that I have now. And obviously the suffering would be greater in that. You know, the boredom for me as an individual might be greater than that. But obviously, like, God's delight in my life would be no different, because, again, it's not about, like, how much we accomplish. It's about how we live every second for His glory, you know, as worshiping Him. So, yeah.
Thank you. Anything else you want to add? Anything on your heart that you're like, oh, I really want to communicate this when talking about these people matter to God?
I mean, obviously I can only speak from my context, but I will say I see a lot of young men in particular and women, but men in particular wanting to do heroic things. And I don't think it's wrong to want to be a hero necessarily. Well, I don't think it's wrong to want to live passionately and wholeheartedly for God's glory. But when you want to be the star of the show, it's just not going to be satisfying. And I see so many like young, insecure men looking for affirmation who want to go into ministry in particular or want to start a business in particular. And it's like, you're going to climb to the top of that mountain and find out there's nothing there. You know what I mean? Like, it isn't going to be satisfying, and you're going to like be empty at the top, because if you're not full of love for God at the bottom, like it's not going to feel any better when you get to the top. That's all. That's all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I wish someone would have told me that 10 years ago. That's really good.
Thanks, honey.
And that wraps up this first podcast, but we don't want this to just be something that you hear and then you go about your day and you don't change anything. So we have a challenge for you at the end of this podcast. We want to challenge you to live your life purpose-filled this week. How could you shift living for yourself and shift living for God in the everyday, in the mundane, in the big things, but with a heart that is ready and willing to glorify God? We want you to pick one way this week that you could do that. Thank you for tuning in, and we can't wait to catch you next time. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to follow us on our other social media platforms. We don't want you to miss out on any future content. Thank you so much again, guys. I hope you have a great day. And I want you to know I am personally praying that your roots stay strong.